Hey guys, how's it going? So today I am going to do another video of what's hiding behind the card frame. Now I did the first video in this series quite a while ago, like a year and a half ago, and I really haven't gotten time to do any of the other card art that I really find interesting in Hearthstone up until now, but you can be assured that I will eventually do all of the card art in Hearthstone in this series that I call What's Hiding Behind the Card Frame. I will eventually do all of the art that I find interesting. So basically in this series I am going to look at any art which aren't fully shown in the card frame, because obviously, as you know, a lot of the art, especially the art from before Un'Goro and the recent expansions, actually was just like a random art made by an artist, and then Blizzard just decided to take that art and slap a card frame on it and then call it a card. So there's actually a lot of hidden nuances and extra art hidden behind the card frame. It's not so much with the recent art, because these days with the expansions, like with the Un'Goro expansion, Blizzard commissions all of the art that they want. So they basically tell an artist that they want a dinosaur made, and then the artist just does a dinosaur, like paints a dinosaur and nothing extra, because that would obviously be wasteful, since they know that they are just going to use the dinosaur. So it's not so much with the recent art that there are hidden stuff, but certainly with the old art, like with the previous expansions, there's a whole bunch of hidden little things. So today we are going to look at a bunch more art that I find interesting. So first off is Squirrel. Now, Squirrel's card art, the normal one, just looks like a little squirrel that is sitting on top of like a rock or something like that. So there's not really anything in the image that would lead you to think that there is anything hidden behind it. But when we look at the full artwork, then we actually see that there is a shitload hidden behind the card frame. So the original artwork was done in 2006, so long before Hearthstone was even a concept. And it depicts a night elf female rogue with a bunch of pets around her. Now, in World of Warcraft, you can tame pets and then you can battle with those pets, and all of these pets that you see here are obtainable in World of Warcraft. So this artist actually put in quite a bit of work in creating this artwork. You can see Mr. Bigglesworth at the bottom left. You can see a mechanical chicken at the bottom right, and a hippogriff hatchling at the bottom right also. And yeah, we know that this is a rogue character, since she is dual wielding two maces, two one-handed maces, and she is wearing leather armor. We know that due to her leather shoulder pads and the leather wrists that she is wearing. So in this artwork there's certainly a lot that is hidden that you wouldn't really know is there, except if you look at the original artwork. So this artwork is really quite interesting in my opinion. Next up is the artwork for Brewmaster. Now, Brewmaster you can only see or fight in the Lorewalker Cho tutorial fight. It is one of the cards that is unique to Lorewalker Cho, and it shows a very angry panda with a little panda baby on his back. But when we look at the full artwork, we can see that there's quite a lot hidden in this one also. he's basically fighting 4 skeletons or 4 undead, and he's just cleaving them in twain. You can see at the bottom right, the one skeleton's head is just cut in half, and the one next to him's head is cut open with his jawbone flying, and the one next to him is missing the top of his head, and the one next to him has his arm cut off. And we see that the daddy panda is actually dual wielding spears, so this daddy panda does not fuck around and is clearly having a bunch of fun spoiling these 4 undead's days. They certainly aren't having a nice day. And then the little baby panda is riding on the back of his daddy, and he just has the biggest smile ever on his face. So yeah, this artwork is also actually pretty cool. The next card we're looking at is the Shadowpan Monk. Now this card is also a card which you can only see when you are fighting the Leokk Cho tutorial. And when we look at the normal art, there's not really much hidden in it. It's just the panda, and then you can kind of see something to the right of him, but you really can't make out what it is. But when we look at the full art, we see that there is certainly a lot going on in this art. So it basically is a artwork from the World of Warcraft Pandaria expansion, and it shows the Alliance fighting on the left with King Anduin Rin at the bottom left, or in the middle left, and then he is fighting against Grommash Hellscream at the bottom right or the middle right, and then there are 3 Pandaren at the top. Now obviously this deals with the Horde and Alliance and the discovery of the Pandaria island, because it's basically a huge island. And then if you know your World of Warcraft lore, Horde and Alliance basically fought over the Pandaria island so that they can stake their claim on this island. And the peaceful Pandaren were basically caught in between the war of these 2 factions. And if you create a character, a Pandaren character in World of Warcraft, they are actually the only race out of like 11 races in World of Warcraft that you can choose which side you want to be on. So once you create your character, you can actually choose, do you want to be an Alliance Pandaren or a Horde Pandaren? So this artwork actually has a lot of lore behind it, particularly when it comes to the World of Warcraft side of things. Next up is Puddlestomper. Now, Puddlestomper's normal card art doesn't look all that impressive. It's basically just a Murloc that's channeling something which at a distance looks like a water bolt or some kind of a water spell. But when we look at the full card art, we can actually see that this Murloc is actually channeling a frost bolt. And I just found it really interesting because for the past year or whatever since this card has been released, I always thought that this Murloc was throwing a water bolt or a water spell, and when I looked at the full card art I was kind of surprised to find out that he's actually channeling an ice spell. So that's pretty cool. Next up is the artwork for the Ironforge Rifleman. Now if you look at the normal card, it's just basically a dwarf with a cigarette in his mouth or a cigar, and there is a night elf to the top left of him, although you don't really know why that night elf is there. So if you look at the full card art, we can see that it's not just that night elf in the original art, it's actually 2 night elves. And that leads us to believe that this is probably a scouting party or a hunting party climbing through the hills of Dun Morog. Now Dun Morog is the zone outside of Ironforge, which is the dwarven capital in Azeroth. So that's where Ironforge Rifleman gets his name. So the artwork basically shows a hunting party of this dwarven hunter, and probably the other two night elves are probably also hunters, since they both have bows. So it's a party of 3 hunters climbing through the icy hills of Dun Morog. Next up is the artwork for Wish for Companionship. Now, this card might not seem familiar unless you played the League of Explorers Adventure. And you get this card when you are fighting against the boss called Zenar. He basically gives you a bunch of wishes, and this is one of the wish cards that you get. So when we look at the full card art, we can actually see that it is Rexxar, and he is surrounded by his 3 best friends, Misha, Leokk and Huffer. Now, the original artwork of Huffer, Leokk and Misha shows them in a very different light. It shows them as being quite irritable, quite angry, and certainly not something that you would expect would want to lick your face. Perhaps Huffer wants to lick your face because, as I'm sure you know, Huffer is often sent into your character's face when you go against a face hunter. But perhaps he just wants to lick your face, as is shown in this Wish for Companionship artwork. So the artwork basically shows these 3 companions in a very different light. It shows a very cheerful and grinning Rexxar in the middle, with Huffer to his left being hugged by Rexxar, and then Leokk to the top right giving Rexxar a big old kiss. And then to the bottom right is Misha, and he's just slobbering all over the place. So I just found this artwork pretty interesting, since it shows all 4 of these characters in a very different light to what you would normally expect them to be. Next up, we're going to look at a few cards which perhaps shows them as much smaller, which you would normally think they would be, but the full artwork actually shows them just how gigantic they are. So the first one is Gahz'rilla. Now, if you've played World of Warcraft, you've probably been to the instance in Daenerys called Zul'Farrak. Now, in Zul'Farrak, you can find Gahz'rilla, and Gahz'rilla is just a little boss. He's like level 52 or something like that, and he's quite a pushover. He's certainly not as fearsome as what his card art would suggest. But when we look at the full artwork, we can actually see that here Gahz'rilla is depicted as a massive, formidable monster. And we can actually see that he is well higher than the walls around him. And if you've been to the Zul'Farrak instance, you will actually know that those walls are probably 3 or 4 times higher than a normal character. So Gahz'rilla in this artwork is actually quite a bit larger than what he is in World of Warcraft. But overall, it's a very beautiful artwork in my opinion, and it portrays the viciousness and destruction of Gahz'rilla quite nicely. And another card which is surprisingly big is Ancient Watcher. Now, if you look at the normal card of Ancient Watcher, it shows Ancient Watcher, which is essentially a massive statue, towering over another card which is also actually in Hearthstone, and that is an Obsidian Destroyer. Now, the Obsidian Destroyer is already pretty big, but when you compare the Obsidian Destroyer to the Ancient Statue, you can see the Ancient Statue, even when he is kneeling, is way bigger than the Obsidian Destroyer. So the Ancient Statue is another card which is deceptively massive. But even the Ancient Statue is a pipsqueak when compared to Soggoth the Slitherer. Now, in the normal card of Soggoth the Slitherer, we can see that he seems pretty big, since he is standing in front of a few humans with a few small trees around him. But when we look at the full card art, we can actually see that he is much bigger than even the mountains around him, like the mountains to his right. And he even makes the trees around him look like little twigs. And that's not even to mention the party of 5 guys in front of him that seem that they're just about ready to run away. Although the guy between his legs at the bottom seems to almost be rejoicing. So I think that Soggoth the Slitherer is probably the biggest card in all of Hearthstone. But the next card actually might come pretty close to him. And that card is Dark Wispers. Now, there's actually a lot of lore behind this card, because it shows Archimonde, who is the Eredar overlord of the Burning Legion, assaulting the World Tree in the Gahz'rilla Mountains. Now, Archimonde is the same race as Lord Jaraxxus, although he is significantly bigger than Lord Jaraxxus for some reason. And he also outranks Lord Jaraxxus, because Lord Jaraxxus, as we all know, is the Eredar Lord of the Burning Legion, but Archimonde is the Eredar Overlord of the Burning Legion, so he commands all of the Burning Legion forces. And Archimonde is second only to Sargeras, who is basically the most powerful evil entity in all of Warcraft. So that makes Archimonde the second in command to the most powerful evil entity in Warcraft. And the lore behind this artwork, which by the way was made in 2006, which is also well before Hearthstone was even a concept, is that Archimonde wanted to absorb the power of the World Tree, which is a massive tree in Mount Gahz'rilla, and he wanted to use that power for himself. And in destroying the World Tree, he would have probably massively reduced the power of the Night Elves, like Terrandi Whisperwind, Malfurion, Cenarius, and many more powerful druids, since they draw much of their power from the World Tree, and without it they surely would have fallen to the power of Archimonde. And this artwork shows his downfall during the fight for the World Tree. Now, I am going to show you a cinematic from 2006 that you got when you finished the Night Elf campaign in Warcraft 3. So even if you now go into your Warcraft 3 folder, you will be able to find this cinematic in there. And like I said, it's the cinematic that you got after completing the Night Elf campaign in Warcraft 3. And it's from 2006, so let's have a look at that cinematic right now.
The roots will heal in time, as will the entire world. The sacrifices have been made. Just as the orcs, humans, and night elves discarded their old hatreds and stood united against a common foe, so did nature herself rise up to banish the shadow forever. As for me, I came back to ensure that there would be a future, to teach the world that it no longer needed guardians. The hope for future generations has always resided in mortal hands. And now that my task is done, I will take my place amongst the legends of the past.
So, as you saw in that cinematic, it depicts the wisps which inhabit all of the trees around the world tree, combining their forces along with the druids in order to attack and overcome Archimonde. And another little surprise is that in that cinematic you can actually hear Medivh the Guardian speaking at the end. And you can also hear his intro music when you play him, that was also played at the end of that cinematic. So that's actually really cool, since you could actually hear Medivh the Guardian's card intro in this cinematic that is way back from 2006, so probably close to 10 years before Medivh was even put into Hearthstone. You could actually hear his voice and his intro music in this cinematic. So that's really quite cool. So yeah, there's quite a lot of lore behind this single artwork of Dark Wispers. And if you can get back to the size of Archimonde, you can clearly see that he is pretty damn big. Although I still think that Soggoth the Slitherer is bigger than Archimonde, because Soggoth is as big as a mountain. So yeah guys, that's all of the art that we are going to look at today, but rest assured I will be diligently looking at more interesting artwork to be included in future videos. If you have a suggestion of a cool or interesting artwork that I should look at, then go ahead and leave a comment below. And as always, leave a like if you enjoyed the video. So that's it. Thanks a lot for joining me in looking what's hidden behind the card frame. And I'll see you next time.